Don't ask somebody to marry you on the first date is one of the first things we do, right? Is let that relationship build at the speed of trust.
Welcome to Social Situation, a podcast where we chat with and celebrate leaders challenging the status quo and creating innovations in social impact. Join us for conversations around the current and future state of social impact, the value of closing the gap between for-profits and nonprofits, and the importance of taking values-informed risks in order to create the greatest impact. On this episode, we'll dive into the complex world of nonprofit healthcare organizations. We'll talk to two nonprofit leaders, Scott Elliott of the Dr. Peter Center and Kevin Sims of the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, who are both incredibly passionate about and committed to the causes they represent. We'll learn how challenging and gratifying it can be to fundraise for life-saving causes, the importance of diversifying funding and supporter streams, and the value of prioritizing support for both those experiencing health challenges as well as their caregivers.
I'm Trevor Loke.
And I'm Erin Mogul.
And this is Social Situation. Erin, welcome. We both kicked off our careers in fundraising with different causes and found our way into healthcare philanthropy at different points. So this is a conversation we're both intimately familiar with. I'm excited today to explore some of the ways that innovation in healthcare are coming together in areas like public health, mental health, caregiving. Erin, your first role was in fundraising and international development, which is another area of healthcare philanthropy we don't always talk about or spotlight. Do you see yourself getting back into this space?
Yeah, I started my fundraising career at an organization called Ubuntu Pathways. They support orphaned and vulnerable children in Port Elizabeth, South Africa, and specifically provide health, education, and household services. All of the children that are supported by the organization are affected by HIV/AIDS. In fact, I had the opportunity to travel to South Africa from New York City, where I was based, and it really put things into perspective, seeing the work of the organization on the ground, meeting a bunch of the youngsters we were supporting, and really seeing how transformational our work was in their lives and their ability to not just survive, but thrive. I could definitely see myself getting back into the healthcare philanthropy space. I'm still an active fundraiser for the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network after having unfortunately lost my dad to pancreatic cancer in 2016. I've realized there's nothing more fulfilling than supporting life-changing and life-saving causes that have the ability to completely change the trajectory of someone's journey. And with that, Trevor, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do you ever see yourself getting back into the healthcare philanthropy space?
Yeah, for me, I do see myself getting back into it. In fact, I've recently joined a major gift committee for a national mental health charity in Canada. I've been more interested about in mental health since the pandemic and how that has affected all of us around the world and how we can support each other moving forward, having learned the lessons of what we went through. I think about healthcare in every aspect from, hospital foundations to research centers to supporting caregiver networks and all of the critical aspects that are out there. And so, I realize that I want to focus my area in mental health to be one of those areas, but one of the areas we'll explore today is some of the more edgy areas of healthcare, safe needle exchanges and supervised injection, which goes to conversations around abortion and reproductive rights access. It goes to trans access and safety. And so healthcare issues are inherently political issues because they impact our ability to live healthy, free lives.
I feel like we could do a whole other podcast episode around that topic. And it's definitely something that is top of mind for me now more than ever. And definitely appreciate your wise sentiments around the clear intersection that we're seeing between healthcare and politics, in our day-to-day lives. So let's definitely continue that conversation. But we do have to move on to our amazing guests and this wonderful episode that we have for all of you today.
Yeah, that's right, Erin. Let's take a short break. We'll continue these conversations in a moment. Stay tuned. $60 billion is being given by companies to nonprofits in 2024 to maximize regulatory benefits and manage reputation for employees and customers. Some companies are struggling. The rest are using OrgMatch because OrgMatch optimizes this process, saving time and money required in due diligence, research, and administration, while increasing confidence in the impact and investment earned. That's why community investment teams around the world are trusting OrgMatch to get the job done. Find out for yourself by going to orgmatch.com. That's orgmatch.com to get started now for free. Welcome to Social Situation. We are honored today to have Kevin Sims, Vice President of Volunteer Field Relations and Engagement at the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network, and Scott Elliott, CEO of the Dr. Peter Center. We're so thrilled to have them both join us today in our first panel discussion. Welcome, Kevin and Scott.
We are so thrilled to have you both here today. And we brought you both together because you're extremely committed to healthcare nonprofits. And, to start off our conversation, it would be great to hear how you both got your start in this sector.
Sure. So about, 30 years or so ago, I decided that working in the not-for-profit sector is where I was going to be. And I've worked in all sorts of different sectors: healthcare, arts, international development. With healthcare specifically, I worked in the AIDS sector about 25 years ago, back when AIDS was really a thing. It was a healthcare issue that was full of stigma. It was full of fear, uncertainty, and very polarizing. I got out of that, and then I was approached about 6.5 years ago, to come and lead the Dr. Peter Center, which also had its roots in this area. And I said no, I had no interest in going back into HIV and AIDS. And then I was convinced to come for a tour of the organization, which I knew. I just hadn't been here in a long time. Walking through the doors, and in a 45-minute tour, I went from absolutely no way to committed and taking on the role of CEO. So here I am in the healthcare sector, complex care. So working with individuals who have what we call complex care on the front lines in Vancouver.
That's awesome. Thanks so much, Scott. Kevin, let's hear from you.
I had a prior life. I had a mid-year life crisis. I was a broadcast news journalist. I lived in like 6 to 7 different cities doing morning news and evening news and running to house fires and car crashes and you name it. And then I started, honestly, I think I started, I was aging out of of local news, I think. But also I just could see kind of the future of where journalism was going. And while journalists are still 100% my heroes, I didn't want to be sort of in the social media world where everybody with a cell phone was taking the place of somebody with a full-time job. And so at that point, I kind of was getting a little burned out on it. I was very fortunate to be in a position where I just left. I didn't really know what I was going to do. I turned in my notice, and a month later I was out of a job, and I spent the whole summer in a public library with free access to internet because I couldn't afford it at my apartment, just job searching and looking for jobs and applying for, everything that was coming along. And then finally that fall of 2013 is when I got hired by the American Cancer Society as basically a grassroots level, field level staff, and did like just early fundraising and recruiting of volunteers, and kind of fell in love with this work. I worked there at the ACS for about 4 years before I then came over to PanCAN, the Pancreatic Cancer Action Network. And it's interesting because when I got out of TV, I had absolutely no idea what any of my skills translated to. I honestly had no idea what I would do for a living. I obviously was probably thinking I'm going to be a communications director or, something like that. And then when, fortunately, that first boss took a gamble on me, I realized how many of those skills were transferable, whether it be talking with folks to learn their story, building those relationships. I used to knock on people's doors at the worst time in their lives when something typically bad had happened to somebody, and had asked them like, hey, would you talk with me, or would you share something? And so I think that honestly set me up to go now, heck yes, I will ask for $10,000 for a worthy cause. Like, I am not afraid. I am not ashamed. If you're not available to do that, I totally get it, but I'm going to make the ask because it's for a good purpose. And so I think a lot of those kind of skills transferred. But yeah, that's kind of how I wound up in the nonprofit health world.
Love that. Thank you both so much for sharing. I think what's so unique is the common denominator is that passion, that connection to the cause that I know you both have. And we're going to continue on and look forward to hearing more about the work that you're doing.
This is really challenging work. I know that you both have really demanding roles. You're supervising staff, volunteers. You're managing budgets. What is keeping you going through this day in and day out? And when stuff is getting hard, how do you deal with that?
I think it's kind of just what you said, Trevor. To me, it's the team and the volunteers. People motivate me. I get motivated by seeing the spark in whether it be staff or volunteers. I get motivated by folks who nobody chose to be a part of the PanCan family. It's not something you would wish upon anybody, quite frankly. They came to make an impact, and I don't think they give up the hours that they give up, the sleep that they give up, the evenings and weekends and happy hours that they give up to do volunteer work, not to see an impact. And so I think that's what carries me through sort of the tougher times or those times where it is quite stressful, and it is quite stressful. And then I think our team is oftentimes the therapist on the other end of the phone, right? We are fundraisers and we are volunteer managers, but our team is so often in so many different roles: coaches, teachers, mentors, therapists. Just helping the team through those things is kind of what carries me through my tougher days, I would say.
Great. When I think about, the work that we do here, I think the number one driver is purpose. Our whole organization is about purpose, and we support those who need an accepting, joyful home where they can connect with others and tend to their bodies and spirit. And I think what's really important about that is we're helping to restore humanity to people where that humanity has been stripped away from them over time. If you think about the types of people we work with, they're the people that you walk by on the street and they're asking for money, or they're passed out on the street and they're binning, which means they're going to garbage and collecting things. And it's quite often, they're the people we avoid. We avoid eye contact. We avoid talking to them. And they become so separated from humanity that there's really not a lot that they have going for them, right? And so I think the number one thing for me and a lot of our staff is we're really creating a space where people have that. And we do that through purpose and through values. We're really a value-based organization. The other is we're leaders in the sort of opioid crisis in Canada now. We've made this transition from being an HIV/AIDS organization that worked with people that were street entrenched or people that had drug addiction and so forth, to not flipping it, but looking at it much more holistically. And we've been doing this work for 25 years. We've got North America's first supervised injection site here at the Dr. Peter Center. And so when we think about that, what that means is we've got this breadth of experience, and we've got this knowledge that most organizations in North America just don't have. Because if you think about the stigma and the community challenges when you work with this type of people, and you start giving them a safe space to use drugs, but it's one way of dealing with the opioid crisis to keep people alive. So death is a part of our thing, just like I heard from Kevin when we talk about pancreatic cancer or cancers. And so death is something we deal with on not a daily basis, but this year there's been 21 deaths so far this year of our personal client base, not the national. Nationally, it's quite horrific in Canada right now, the overdose death crisis. We work in a way which gives people humanity, gives people choice, and allows people to be who they are, right? And make their own choices. So that's what keeps me motivated.
Thank you both so much for sharing. I see so many common kind of themes there in terms of those personal relationships that you're building. So I'm going to shift gears a little bit now. So we have named our podcast Social Situation. Trevor and I both work in the social impact space. I think that term is used to mean many different things right now, but I'd love to hear what comes to mind for you both when you hear the term social impact.
I mean, to me, I just break it down to like just making the world a better place. To me, social impact is just trying to do good for the good of humanity. So that's kind of what I initially think of. PanCan is a mid-sized nonprofit, I would say. I think we're around 150 employees right now. There's no way that we could make the impact that we've done without a nationwide network of volunteers to do the social impact. When we try to recruit volunteers and then have them bring on their networks to cast that wider net, we could not get it, we could not physically place somebody in 60 cities, which is not nearly what some of the larger nonprofits have, right? Is like a presence everywhere. You just can't physically afford that. You can't, it's not feasible, all those things. And so to bring on volunteers and people that want to do this for social good is kind of how I see it playing out with PanCan. And then helping them along. I know there's a sort of healing along with that in the work we do, sort of finding what the volunteer or the person that comes to PanCan is looking for, right? Not us necessarily going to them and saying, we need you to do this, but instead hopefully meeting them and saying, what would you like to do? What kind of a difference are you looking to make? And then having that conversation about how they can do that within what we do as an organization.
Before I talk about social impact, I just want to give my definition of philanthropy, which is voluntary action for public good, because I see the two things really connected together. So for me, if I look at social impact, thinking about the two words, impact is actually getting something done, right? Another way that I look at that would be creating a future that would not otherwise exist. When I think about that, I really like that definition, of impact, because we're creating something that wouldn't exist if we didn't do it. The default future is one thing, and then we have an impact that changes the outcome of the future. And I think that's something that's really cool. The social part of it, for me, when we look at that, we're a relational based organization. So we have relationships with all of the clients and participants we serve, but we also have a lot of relationships with government, and we have relationships with corporate, and we have relationships with donors. And with each one of those, what we do is we allow space for these different sectors or different organizations to become involved in the cause. It's not always possible, for someone to work in the field, that we're working in. We can only take so many volunteers here at the center. And frankly, when it comes to government, what we have to do often with the government is we have to help lead them and help give them information so they can make informed choices. And that's a part of that social impact, right? So we've got social impact at a very high strategic level with government bodies. We've got social impact with corporate organizations, because how many corporates these days want to talk about the opioid crisis? Like very few, I can assure you, because it's too stigmatized, it's too dangerous. But that was the same case for AIDS 30 years ago, and breast cancer 20 years ago, and prostate cancer 10 years ago. And even mental illness today is starting to get a little bit of traction, right? But that's part of our job in social impact. And then the same with individuals. We allow a space for an individual to become a donor because they want to positively impact, things that we do. By creating trust, or by creating sometimes just that opportunity for someone to get involved is, I think, a great way to have that. So bottom line for me, social is about that relational. It's about different sectors and different people. And impact is truly about creating a future that would not otherwise exist.
I love that. It's, giving people the opportunity to make a positive impact. Sometimes people in their lives don't know which causes to support or how to get involved. So when organizations like both of yours provide that opportunity and that stewarding and that relationship building, it's really making such an impact on them and in turn on the individuals and communities that you support. And I just wanted to note, my big takeaway from what you both shared, which was just wonderful, is it's about action. It's about pushing the needle, right? When we think about social impact, it's about that relationship building piece, whether it's the relationship with the clients that you're serving, whether it's the relationship with the donors, with the corporate partners, with the volunteers. It's bringing people into the fold of how you can do good and think about your impact on the community. Really appreciate what you both shared. Thank you.
And just building off of that relationship piece, I mean, one of the relationships that is so valuable is with those volunteers. And, volunteers can look a lot of different ways. They could be board or committee members. They could be basically full-time employees who are showing up every day almost as staff people. It could be more casual. So Kevin, knowing your role and how important and core volunteers are to it, I'm curious about how you manage the diversity of the volunteers you have and how you engage with them and motivate them, knowing that they're going fully off of the impact that they're able to create.
And on diversity, are you literally talking about how do we manage the bringing in a diverse volunteer group, Trevor?
Well, I think that's a good point. I mean, I think
Yeah.
there's the diversity of the individuals, and then there's a diversity of the roles that they're doing as well. So I think, yeah, if you could speak to both.
Yeah, I think on one, we are really over the last couple of years started to invest in some new recruitment efforts around diversity. We recognize to this day that our volunteer affiliates do not reflect the communities in which they live or they serve. One of the first things to course correcting there is to measure that. And so just over the last year or so, we've started doing some baseline measuring of volunteer metrics. And so we have to measure that first to even see how we measure up. And what we found is that, we skew very heavily to a female white audience currently. So we have to recognize that. And then we have to be intentional about reaching other audiences. Currently pancreatic cancer has higher incidences in African Americans and Ashkenazi Jews. As we look towards who it's affecting most, we also want to bring folks into the community who can spread signs and symptoms and be the trusted advisors among those groups. One thing we know, and I taught, folks don't necessarily always go to a specialist for treatment. Some communities go to a church, right? And so knowing that and building relationships outside of normal, I would say, volunteer recruitment efforts is some things that we're putting into practice right now.
Thanks, Kevin. Yeah, no, that is spot on. And there's so many different types of relationships when we think about the nonprofit sector, as we've been, kind of alluding to prior. So Scott, I'd love to ask your thoughts on more of the, for-profit relationships that a nonprofit might have. So what do you think is the key to strong and lasting partnerships between nonprofits and companies that are supporting them, whether they're supporting financially, whether they're supporting through volunteer engagement or, any other sort of engagement? What do you think is the key to that success in, the two working closely together?
Right. So for me personally, the key to success of the corporate not-for-profit working together just goes back to relationships and goes back to trust and the ability to have open and effective conversation. Volunteerism in Canada has been changing a lot, over the last, few decades, and we're seeing that quite significantly. And one of the things in the corporate sector as well, volunteers may change. And we have these days of caring, quote unquote. They want to send a group in and do all of that. That doesn't work for us. So I'm very clear, thank you, but no thank you. That's team building for the corporate. It's nice, but go do that on your own time. We can't manage that. The way that we use volunteers, it's a little bit, they come and work in our kitchen, they work with our participants. It's got to be longitudinal because it's relational based, or they're highly professional, highly strategic relationship. And another thing that we're doing, because, and I think with many not-for-profits, a huge part of what we need to do is help educate people so they understand what it is, the topic or purpose that we work towards, right? And so sometimes just getting the corporate sector to partner with us on educational sessions on, in my particular case, what is opioid addiction? What is the overdose crisis? What does it really mean? What is the government corporate response? And that doesn't really sound like volunteerism, but it is. If you're asking corporate people to take time out of their day, to listen to a seminar or come and join with us and have a dialogue so they can ask whatever they want to ask and to move through some misconceptions or to bring new light on topics. I think that's another really interesting way that I can see us moving forward with corporate sector volunteerism as well.
Thank you. No, it's really, I just love the focus on relationships and how that works. And it kind of relates to the next topic I want to shift to, Scott, around leadership, managing relationships and making space for people to have relationships. is so important to what a leader does. And how do you show up as a leader in your work and help to foster the relationships, between your, with your team, with your donors, with your board? What does showing up like a leader look like?
When I think about leadership, I go back to my personal definition, which is a leader creates a world that would not otherwise exist. That's my only role as a leader. So I need to help the organization and help any relational people that I'm talking with imagine what the world can look like if we work together with social impact, with action, whatever that is to help move people to that space. So my role at the Dr. Peter Center as CEO is I've got all the management stuff and I've got to take care of the people and all of that. And also, as a leader, it's to help project a message of this is what we can do and we can accomplish if we so choose. We work in a space where there's a lot of advocacy groups and there's a lot of us versus you. There's a lot of blame and shame, both directions, between our organizations and government or our organizations and corporate. And we don't do that. So my approach as a leader is I come across, again, with our values, right? I come across as humanity. I am authentic. I am who I am. So when I show up with you or a participant, a client, or the president of a country, it doesn't matter. I'm the same human being at all times. They all get the same thing. And that's super powerful because I think it builds a trust, right? And so when I look at a leader, a part of my job is to build trust both within the organization, but also with all of the external people that we work with, the boards, the government, the corporates, the donors, and knowing when to pivot, knowing when to say, okay, we get it. You don't want to work in that, fine, that's fine. And never shaming anyone. That's a key thing of ours is if it doesn't work with a partner, we say thank you and we move on, right? It's not, there's no like whining and complaining and beating down the door. That doesn't work for our organization. I think sometimes that is necessary. We need that protest, mentality, which you look back at HIV/AIDS 35 years ago. We needed that. We don't need that today for our organization. What we need is compassion. What we need is leading firmly and, certainly getting stuff done. Like we get a lot of stuff done. We punch way above our weight. And that's from allowing people to do their jobs as well. So one last thing about leadership, don't micromanage. I'm the guy who's running and throwing shit behind me, right? I'm just throwing stuff and people have to catch it and move on with it. And if I don't have a team that we can do that, right, we'll get, 1/5 done of what we actually do.
Kevin, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that question as well. How do you show up as a leader and what does that look like for you?
Everything that you and Scott said, right? I think it's about accountability. It's about authenticity. I'm going to steal a statement that I heard from a gentleman during one of our workshops earlier this summer is that relationships move at the speed of trust. We always talk about going out and just meeting for coffee, going out and talking to folks, going out and listening more than you talk. And don't ask somebody to marry you on the first date is one of the first things we do, right? Is let that relationship build at the speed of trust. And so really trying to put that into practice, Erin, as a leader. And then finally, I will say, I am not the president. I am not the CEO. I am not a chief. And so also understanding where my leadership is within the organization, which is somebody who can control the things that I can control. Certainly working with my supervisor and her supervisor and the rest of the organization leadership. But at some point, and sometimes it's about, as a leader, what I can control within the confines of our department or the work within our department or within our volunteer base, and really pulling and pushing on those levers so that folks don't get necessarily frustrated, so that you can take action on things, right? And don't get frustrated on the things that necessarily aren't really within our control. One of the things that initially, at the beginning of this, we talked about how did you get into this work and what brought you into it. And I remember, Erin, it's been a couple of years ago, but one of the things just in getting candidates to the positions, I wasn't really liking the pool of people I was getting. And so I happened to be watching a newscast one morning and talking about, it was a large, I think, soft drink organization that did this first. and just removing it's such a simple thing, but just removing the requirement for a degree, right? And I got to thinking about that, about like, I don't care if somebody has a degree if the work that, if their work product, if they have the experience that we want, if they have the hunger, if they have the passion, I would rather take somebody over that than somebody who doesn't click on a job or doesn't apply to a job or a volunteer role, etc., whatever it might apply, just because it says something on the requirements. And so again, controlling those things that I can control within my leadership area.
If I can add one more thing about leadership, you triggered some things, and for me, it really goes back to values again. And I lead through my values, and I'll just run through 6 of them very quickly. So integrity, doing the right thing, even when no one's watching, right? And also integrity is about a system. If it's not working, then if one little thing and the system doesn't work, the whole system falls apart. Humanity, we've got to be human. Treat people with kindness, treat people with respect, treat people with compassion. Authenticity, I am who I am. You get what you get. I am not the smartest person in the world. I'm not the dumbest person in the world. I'm not the kindest person in the world. I'm not the meanest person. I am me. I have potty mouths. You might hear swear words come out every now and then. Self-determination is choice. We let everybody have their own choice, and we lead that way as well. So we don't tell you what to do. We give you an opportunity to make a choice. We stand with you. Inclusivity means I'm a part of. People want to belong. If we're not a part of something and we're apart from, it just doesn't work. And then lastly for me is tenacity. And tenacity means very simply, we don't give up. It's when we know it's the right thing to do, we have to do it. And we've got to keep going and keep trying. But you balance that with humanity. So you're not being mean, you're not being, arrogant or whatever, but you're certainly not giving up. So when I look at a values-based way of leading, I see that within our organization, that really works. And the more people are bolted into those values and understand and live those values, the more powerful they can be in any type of work situation without offending or without, bullying, without being weird. You know what I mean? So I really think values are a huge part of our leadership.
So many great lessons learned. Thank you both so much for sharing. And for our last question, which you both might deem as the most important one. So I know you both are dog owners. I am too. I have a mini golden doodle who I love, who runs my life. Trevor is a great friend to many dogs, I've heard. I would love to hear what your dogs have taught you. It could be about life, it could be about your careers, or just something in general.
Gosh, my dog has taught me how to wake up at 6:15 in the morning without an alarm. He's right there. There's a picture of him. Tybee is his name. Yeah, he's just, they're the best.
How about you, Scott?
Sure. Well, this is the puppy Luna, who's no longer a puppy. She's actually 2 years old, but you can see she's 20 pounds of love. She's a therapy dog here at the Dr. Peter Center, as well as my own personal therapy dog. And I've now called her the director of oxytocin. And oxytocin is the love hormone that, and the studies have shown that when you look into the eyes, say a mother and a baby, this love hormone keeps growing and growing and growing. And the same is true, with a lot of it, not all animals, but some. So if you don't have a dog, go and you can responsibly take care of one, go get one. It'll change your life forever. Best thing that ever happened to me in the last few years.
I love that. Well, thank you both for joining us today. I really appreciate the generosity of your time. So we want to thank again Kevin and Scott for joining us. Kevin Sims from PanCan. You can learn more about PanCan at www.pancan.org. And Scott Elliott from Dr. Peter Center. You can learn more about the Dr. Peter Center at www.drpeter.org. Thank you so much.
Looking to make an impact, but not sure where to start? Elevate Social Impact, a purpose-driven consulting and coaching practice, helps companies develop their CSR strategies and embed a culture of giving back into their brand. And they guide individuals looking for fulfilling careers in social impact. Whether you're wanting to grow your company's give back efforts or find values alignment and make a greater difference through your work, Elevate Social Impact is excited to equip you with the knowledge, resources, and tools that you need to get started. Check out elevatesocialimpact.com today to learn more.
Welcome back. Erin, it's time for us to share what's on our mind after another great episode and conversation. What are you thinking about today?
Yeah. So, Trevor, I don't know about you, but there are so many amazing webinars out there. So many, unfortunately, I don't get to join live, but I have a whole folder in my email dedicated to all of the conversations I want to listen to, all the people I want to learn from. And I was catching up the other day and listening to a really impactful conversation that was co-hosted by CSR Talent Group and Blackbaud. And it was focused on unlocking the powerful connection between employee well-being and engagement, which is a topic that I am very passionate about. And so wanted to just kind of share some thoughts, on this topic because it really got me thinking about employee wellness. It got me thinking about the huge power of getting out in the community and making a positive impact, and not only what that can do for the community at large, but also for employees. So, just a couple of my thoughts and takeaways. So, when you think about it, first and foremost, employee engagement is a great tool to get employees excited about your company, right? So, employee engagement in this sense is referring to volunteerism opportunities, workplace giving opportunities, maybe skills-based volunteering, really opportunities for employees to come together, to build camaraderie with one another, to build some great relationships, maybe to engage with people they don't work with on a daily basis, but to also get out there in the community and do good and use their skills and their brains and their hearts and minds to make a positive impact for communities around them. When we give employees the opportunity to get out in the community as a representative of their company, that really only enhances their happiness and connection to the mission of the organization. It helps them feel like their company is truly committed to impact and to purpose and to their values, right? Employees now more than ever want to feel values aligned with their employer. So, just so many takeaways in terms of how companies providing these sort of opportunities can make such an impact on the day-to-day well-being of an employee, as well as on the day-to-day lives of whomever they're supporting in the broader community. So much more to unpack there, but I'll leave it at that. And Trevor, I'd love to hear what's been on your mind recently.
So, what's been on my mind this week has been the idea of having a theory of change for your organization. And this is both for fundraisers and for grant makers. I'm often asked, what's a theory of change? Well, it's really, what's the simple, focused vision that you have for the world that you want to create and how you'll contribute to it. And oftentimes this can be detailed on, one sheet of paper, really as simply as possible. It doesn't have to be very complex. And I've seen organizations doing something as simple as saying, we want to plant X number of trees. And the way that we're going to do that is we're going to both show up and we're going to work with grassroots organizations around the world that are already doing this. And, that's one example of like a very simple theory of change that could come about. The trend that I'm seeing is that organizations that have this, that have done the work of bringing stakeholders together, asking them where they want their focus to be, asking them how they want to show up, and documenting this, are seeing not only their impact coming to fruition, but they're able to tell strong, consistent stories throughout their company and organization and externally, which is generating them more business, going back to the point of effective employee engagement that you were making. And so, my recommendation, what's on my mind, is thinking about what the theory of change is at your organization if you don't have one, and pulling the people together that could help you get started on one. If you're not sure where to start, there's certainly a number of good organizations out there that can help you. There's a lot of foundations and nonprofits that have very, very good theories of change. I would Google search some examples, find something you like, or even just ask around and see someone who's gone through that process before. But definitely would recommend having a theory of change for your organization, because it will unlock all of the impact, all of the value you're looking to give in the world while reinforcing your brand.
That's such a great recommendation, Trevor. I feel like the term theory of change it's something we're hearing more and more about these days. And it's great to hear your definition for anyone who might not be familiar. Definitely something I am still working on as well as I grow my business. So thank you so much for sharing more about the value of a theory of change, Trevor. I'm always learning so much from you. Social Situation is co-hosted by me, Erin Mogul, Trevor Loke, and presented by Elevate Social Impact and OrgMatch. Editing is by Tristan Thompson. New episodes are released on the second Thursday of each month. Visit socialsituationpodcast.com to learn more or subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.